All right, welcome to the Aspen Collective, 213 South Mill Street in the Wheeler Opera House, downtown Aspen. We are honored to have Yuri Zupancic here, showing his incredible, insightful, thoughtful, deep artwork. And tell you a little quick backstory. I'm a Kansas guy, and so is Yuri. And we share a lot of bonds, and we've been friends for 20 years plus. Yeah. And Yuri has created artworks that have always inspired me. And I have personally collected a lot of these works for 2 decades. And this show is a culmination of this long-term relationship that has been very dear to my heart. And Yuri can speak about how we met and maybe a little bit about our relationship. But the main thing that I want to say just to start off is this is going to be informal and easy and short, hopefully. And we might take some questions, but we normally don't do that. Yuri makes microchip paintings painted with his eyelashes. And he makes these little brushes.
Yeah, you can bring one out. Just the final details. I start with the smallest brushes you can get, and then...
This has an eyelash.
Yeah.
In the paintbrush, and we can pass it around, and
yeah,
you can all look at it. And Yuri's work bridges history, the history of art, the power of technology, the depth of the information age that we live in. And the works all comment on very powerful topics that are incredibly important. And one of the works that really inspired me was a portrait he made of Edward Snowden. And when you see Edward Snowden painted as a face on a microchip, you think about what is the history of that? What is the history of data? What is the history of information? How does that inform what's going on? Now, I'm going to quit talking. But I'm just so honored and inspired to be showing Yuri's work in this important location. So the first thing I want to ask is to Yuri about maybe a little bit of our relationship and how we've kind of come together. And then the important thing is he's been working on our property on Aspen Mountain, and being in the mountains of Aspen is such a powerful thing. And that's why Elizabeth Pepke was a genius. She knew that bringing artists here and creatives here unlocks the mind. So the first thing I want to ask you is about what is it like working in the woods?
Great question, and it's a dream come true. And as you say, unlocks the mind, and that's very well put. It's really impressive. And fortunately, this is the fourth time that, thanks to DJ's and his hospitality to let me crash in his land in a bus on the backside of the mountain, that I've really got a chance to connect with these hills and this nature, and making friends with the foxes and the deer and the bear and the marmots and everything, and the stars, and as you say, that unlocks new perspectives. And for me, that's rewind a little bit. I got family history for over 100 years in Colorado, and I grew up exploring the mountains, etc. And I've always just loved this area. But then I moved far away. I moved to France, thanks to this wonderful woman. And it's Pauline of Roland, also a great artist. And so anyway, but we have made it a point to cultivate our connection with Colorado. And thanks to DJ, we have the perfect place to do that. And not just with the mountains, but with our own creativity. And when we're up there, you are not distracted by all the little notifications, etc., or you reconnect with something else. And so for me, and this whole show is about connections, connectivity. At what point we live in a connected world? At what point when there's a disconnection, we're screwed. And at the same time, that liberates your mind to make other connections with nature, with...
Come on in, guys. Get in here and squeeze in. Get in here and squeeze in.
Come on in.
Mark.
Room for everybody.
Get in here. So what I want to say about Yuri's work and the fact that he's working in the mountains without connections, he's creating these artworks in the woods where he's not being bothered by his notifications and his work. But yet his work that he's making in there is directly related to the fact that this is an interconnected world. Yeah. Everything is watched, everything is looked at, everything is monitored. This work about Edward Snowden that I mentioned before, there's also this interconnected world of revolution and protest. And I think that another important aspect of Yuri's work that he's talking about is like the ability to reject and comment on this digital world.
Sure, it's not quite a rejection. I just accept it, because rejecting it would be trying to swim upstream on a waterfall. You know, it's happening. We got to live with it. But for me, I think the best adjective I could give to working in the mountains is transcendental, because you're above it all. You look at the whole big picture, you know?
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the process. These microchips are painted with an eyelash that Yuri puts on the paintbrush. The paintbrush has made it around the crowd. Can you talk about what you're thinking about when you're making these tiny microchips? And there's all these magnifying glasses that people can
please
get to see the works. But why did you decide to paint on microchips?
Well, in the beginning, you know, I was making paintings more in a regular format 20-some years ago. And I loved it, but at the same time, I was learning Photoshop. I mean, since the mid-90s, et cetera, and obsessed, and just, I mean, I grew up exactly at the point where I became an adult, right when the internet was unleashed upon us. And so that's a very particular moment in history, and a very particular moment in my life, right, when you're becoming an adult, et cetera. And I was very much marked by that change in our society, which only continues and only grows. And I've never lost my obsession and fascination with, I mean, there's so many important subjects and so many important themes, et cetera. But for me, the wave of change at such a dramatic pace and at such huge proportions that is just sweeping over all of our society and our world relations because of the information technology, it's just such a huge topic. I can't ignore it.
Yeah, and when you think about the way data travels through fiber optics, it's truly mind-blowing. And one of my favorite experiences with Yuri personally, and by the way, he says he lives in a bus in the woods on Aspen Mountain making these works. He's also been very generous to me, and I live in his basement in Bagnolet, the place to be, yeah, which is the last subway stop on a wonderful subway line that goes right to Republique.
Number 3.
You can get on any subway you want. So they've been very generous to me because Paris has a special place in my heart for so many reasons. And the main reason is because these two are there.
Well, you're too sweet. But that's, I mean, it's also worth mentioning.
But let me mention my experience.
Tell the story.
We're walking through the streets and there's an old TV just sit out on the curb. And Yuri gets out his tools and rips it open, pulls it apart, goes into the thing, and then rips out the microchips. And then we keep walking. Stuffs it in his pocket, and he goes, "That's going to be a good one."
I don't think it's painted on here, but it's... Yeah, well, that goes back a long ways. And since my parents are actually here, which I'm honored to finally do an artist talk where they're actually here, because we live far away, 9 time zones away. But anyway, the first time I ripped open electronics and pulled it out and looked at it, I was maybe not even 10 years old when we threw out our first personal computer. And my dad's like, take this out to the dumpster. I'm like, okay. Got to the alley and started breaking it apart. And I was like, what's in this thing? How could this machine, I've got to see what makes it possible. What's the magic? And I ripped it open and I found these circuits, you know. It's like a geode, you know. It's like the crystals inside the rock. And I've been forever locked in that moment of amazement of like the material quality that makes all of these tools and software and so many different things we use that are so hidden, actually. So it's the material quality I find beautiful of these things. And I think I have this childlike reflex of like, how does this freaking work? Like, what is behind this? Like, what? And so I've always had this childhood fascination of what is the material quality of circuitry, of electron. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not like a 2x4 you put on a 2x6 to build a wall. Like, it's so dense that it's fascinated me all my life, and I'm still in that phase. But I think as humans, I think we're still in childhood or maybe adolescence of figuring out how to reckon with the impact of all these electronics in our life.
And one of the beautiful things, one of my good friends, he owns one of these fancy websites. I'm not going to mention it, but it's all about porn. And when you think about porn online, there's a lot of great artworks in here that relate to sexuality. And this is one of my favorites. And I would like you to talk a little bit about the form of the human and the beauty of the body and how you've integrated the body into the technology.
Yeah, a good question, because it is a big theme for me. And I mentioned transcendentalism before, and that's a huge thing for me, of like Walt Whitman, I sing the body electric. And that poem, by the way, if you read that in terms of technology, there's all these parallels of like, and his whole idea was to basically affirm our physical form and find the beauty in that. And for me, I believe that our physical form today includes all our electronics, all our devices, et cetera. That's our life, that's us. And so I'm really interested in exploring and affirming what is our life, what are the things that we use every day to do everything we have to do, and our physical body, I feel, is extended through our machines, as Marshall McLuhan would have said, et cetera.
And one of the great experiences I had the other night, as Yuri and I were hanging the show at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night, we put all these computer keys. And I was trying to do the layout, and I love salon style. It's a thing that I'm hugely into. And if you ever get a chance to go to London, there's a museum there, Sir John Soane's museum. He was the guy buying all the stuff off of all the ships coming in from the East India Company. The British Museum goes, that guy's got the idea, let's fucking cut him out, right? Well, in his museum is one of my favorite artworks in the world. It's called The Rake's Progress, and it's Henry Hogarth. And the artworks open up, and The Rake's Progress is a great artwork that has a lot of parallels to Aspen. But I will just say that in Sir John Soane's museum is also this salon style thing going on, just art everywhere. Well, I put all these computer keys on this pedestal. I moved the sculpture. Then we're all looking at it, and then we're like, what about like typing? They're computer keys, and it's like typing like this.
Yeah, and what does it do if you push the kneecap or the belly button?
And then I had this, I like to be involved in the curatorial approach, and Yuri was gracious enough to let me do this. So I had it all laid out there. And then I had this like mind-opening experience, and I was like, that should be like this. And how about a keyboard of just body parts?
Yeah, I thought of it. By the way, did you notice I added the kneecap?
You added the kneecap.
Yeah.
But I want the toenail.
I'm working on the toenail. But I've been busy.
Okay, so we have these computer keys that are painted on. We have these crushed up circuit boards that he glued together with these powerful keys on top of them. We have the microchips. We have a very powerful piece right here in the middle which is about the Civil War. And can you talk about that piece?
Yeah, I mean, the subject of the painting in the middle, it's a painting of a Civil War battle. It's kind of imagined out of various Civil War paintings. But I actually started that 4 years ago in Aspen during all the political turmoil. And I got a while, and then I just gave up because it was very difficult, actually, to paint a Civil War scene on a microchip. And so I parked it for a while. But when I got back, I brought it back out here. And a few weeks ago, after the assassination attempt, Trump, and and being around people are feeling the climate and the environment of things, like, no, I have to continue this work. I need to, because honestly, it's sad to say, but I'm convinced that the Civil War was never really completely finished. I feel like there's these divides that still exist, and where I witness them the most is on the internet. And I go in a chat room, and someone makes some post, and then, there's whatever. I feel like the little battles are continuing all over the internet and all across this country and beyond, but particularly the focus of this work is about the conflicts that are taking place in this country that trace back to divides that go back over 150 years. And, it's a heavy work for me, but I'm really proud of it, and it's also kind of funny to me that people could be so high and mighty on a comment section,
And I'll mention, when Yuri came to town and he moved into the residency in the woods, and we started talking about this microchip, this particular one, and then he had this idea to frame the microchip within a portrait of the United States. And that's when I was like, that is pure genius. I mean, it's so powerful, and it's blending the microchip art with a symbol and an artwork. And I'm looking at all the artwork. Every piece has a story. You can look at this peace dove in the middle over here, and it makes me think of the conflict in Ukraine.
Exactly. That was inspired by that conflict and other conflicts. It's all conflicts, but.
And we don't want to belabor everybody with this conversation. Do we have any quick comments of anybody that wants to say anything?
Yeah, it's beautiful work. It's also very figurative as well. It's not just, I don't know how you think it is so beautifully and accurately.
Oh, thank you. Obsessionally. That's the only word for it.
And this work, I'll take your question next, but this work in the middle was also this vision that Yuri and I had at I'll mention something about Paris. I love Paris. It's the best city in the world. And the reason I love it is because when I go there, my time zones change. And that means I can go out from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. and be up.
Yeah, he doesn't shift his time schedule. He just keeps his Aspen hours in Paris. And it works out great. He meets...
Because we have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
He's like, oh man, I met this Russian curator. And anyway, Paris is a great city for the night.
So we talked about taking his pieces and making physical sculptures of bodies. And, Dustin Yellen has been around here. He does these big sculptural bodies. But I also love this idea of, and we'll talk about that quickly next, about what you have in mind for your future. But let's take another question here.
So Yuri, these pieces are really thought-provoking.
Well, thank you.
And,
I hope so.
I'm curious, were you in any way inspired by, for example, the Japanese artists that painted miniature?
Yeah.
Or even the sculptors of
Absolutely. There's a lot of classical traditions. There's the Persian traditions. There's the British, Dutch, obviously several different Asian countries. There's a lot of miniature traditions tracing back the world. It's kind of it's never been the headline of any art movement, but it's people have always had a love for miniatures, and they still do, and I love them, and I never find them, so I got to make them myself, and I'm glad you appreciate them.
Yeah, and one of the ideas that we have yet to fulfill is Yuri was born in Dodge City, Kansas. Another great Dodge City artist is a good friend of ours. His name is Stan Hurd. He makes entire crop field artworks. So he does like Van Gogh's sunflowers in 16 acres. And the only way to see his art is by photographing it from a plane. And my father is Stan Hurd's lawyer. And Stan Hurd is a character. And we had this idea years ago about a show called Micro Macro, and how cool it would be to juxtapose these artworks that are entire fields of art and with tiny pieces. And what I want to know is, when you think about what's next for you creatively, what is in your mind for what you want to create next?
Well, I'm going to first follow up on what you mentioned about scale, because that's huge. For me, the fact that Stan Hurd and I both were living in the same time, in the same town, in the middle of nowhere in western Kansas, there's this sense of scale in the high plains, and also out here in the mountains, which I grew up spending a lot of time here too. But there's a sense of immense scale where it makes you feel as a human very, very small, but at the same time very, very connected. And I think that's something Stan Hurd and I have in common, of playing with the scale, and obviously he went big and I went small. But for me, it's also thinking about a tiny microchip, sure, or one little button you click on a little screen hidden away, but that could be your whole future. Or that could, there's a universe in a grain of sand, and I think that spending time in the Great West it gives you new perspectives of scale, and that's why one reason I appreciate continuing to spend time out here, and I hope to spend more and more time out here in the future. Got to continue to find opportunities, etc. But in general, I just want to continue working, exploring, and create things that I can't even imagine yet. Because that's what, for me, a real artist's dream is to know you're going to continue to make something, but not know exactly what you're going to continue to make. There's a lot of themes here that you see in the show that I want to continue to explore. And also because I know they will lead me to other ideas that I can't even imagine right now. So I'm going to keep exploring. That's all. I only promise.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to say that I am so honored. What's that?
One more thing, just because we didn't talk at all about this one, and I think
this, by the way, yeah. Thank you, because that is a whole new medium for me, which I have never seen anyone else do, actually. Where, as I say, since the beginning of my whole art career, I've gone back and forth between digital art, and I do make video art, and a lot of Photoshop, etc., and painting. And so this is my latest innovation of finding a way to blend painting and digital video making, animation. And what I've realized during my painting process is that I've always used a lot of references, and I'll photograph my painting, then Photoshop it to look for ideas. I sketch with Photoshop. And at a certain point, I realized, why do I stop with sketching? I could finish the painting on the computer. Instead of doing the final details with an eyelash brush, I could do them with the Adobe Suite and a video projector. And so for me, the idea of this digital video map painting is that the goal, and I'm going to continue developing this, which also responds to your question, that I want to create a seamless continuum between my painting process and my digital creation process. I want the painting to actually come to life digitally, and the first like 15 layers are with paint, and the last 15 are with video animation. And that's something I'm really excited about continuing to explore. I hope to do that on a much larger scale as well. And I do a whole show of those at some point. But I'm always going to keep the microchips going, because that's been 20 years and I still haven't gotten bored of it, so I know that I'll keep going with that. But I always, like I said, I got to keep exploring, and that lately is my favorite path to explore.
Okay, very last question is, what has it been like curating and building this show and showing your art in the Aspen Collective in the heart of Aspen and working with me and the gallery?
Well, aside from working with you, no, I'm just kidding. It's been amazing. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I mean, I really am. It's been a dream come true, really, because I've spent my whole life coming out here and seeing these beautiful places, and of course coming to Aspen, where it's just like, oh my God, the Glitter Gulch, all the best things in the world all together in one little place, and that I could bring my little things and share them in the middle of this nexus of culture and community, and it's such an international place. That's also why it's so interesting to me, is because everybody in here has seen the whole world, and it really is a place where many things connect. And I'm fascinated with connections. So that makes this an incredibly exciting place for me to create art and to share art.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. And we're going to be featuring Yuri's work on the Aspen Collective website, and the show is up through the weekend. And thank you all for being here.
Thank
Rock
you all.
and roll. Thank you.